Welcome back to another edition of the NBA Fantasy Baller, brought to you by FantasyDraft.com. This is for March 7th, 2017. Last night, our core three came through in a pretty big way. Kawhi Leonard was close to or above 60 fantasy points, depending on the site you play. Paul Millsap was in the upper 30s to early 40s. And Kemba Walker broke the 40-point plateau yet again. The value plays left somewhat to be desired, though. Our main play, Bismack Biyombo, did what he knew he was going to be able to do, and he put up a 28 to 30-point fantasy outing. Terrence Ross didn't do too well. Thabo Sefolosha started off reasonably hot and then just played defense, so we didn't really get it there. And Patty Mills had an okay but ultimately not rewarding fantasy performance. I was on a 12-game slate that featured the most chaos we've seen yet in this aging NBA season. Tonight we'll only get 3 games to pick from, so it's going to be tight. And the big decision tonight is going to be to Russell Westbrook or not to Russell Westbrook. Now, on a lot of these 3-game slates that Westbrook has been on, because I feel like he's been on quite a few, it's been Westbrook, and then the drop-off to the next best point guard has been Goran Dragic or Mike Conley or something like that. Definitely not the case tonight, as we've got John Wall, Damian Lillard, Eric Bledsoe, all in that, 8K and above range, all in relatively good matchups to boot. So there's not as much of a insistence on playing Russell Westbrook. Now, I will tell you personally that I will have my fair share of Russell Westbrook because I just don't see it being realistic that any of these other guys hit 65 to 70 fantasy points. It would be year highs if any of them were to do that. Now, after saying all of that, I'm going to start things off today with Seth Curry of the Dallas Mavericks against the Los Angeles Lakers. 12-3 on FantasyDraft, 6-2 on FanDuel, 6-6 on DraftKings. Curry, aside from blowouts, is seeing minutes in the mid-30s, and minutes are always a major factor in my decision-making for daily fantasy because minutes means opportunities. Curry has been delivering around the 30 to 34, 38 fantasy point range, which is right where we need him to tonight to hit value. Now, you might say that's really not giving you much upside, but if you look at the next best option at the position in Bradley Beal, priced in some spots at $8,000, I mean, a lot of his upside is gone too. Bradley Beal, yes, upper 30s player. He has hit the 40s in the past 2 games, but that's not something he's doing on a regular basis, so a lot of the value is eliminated there. If you want to spend up a point guard tonight, I think you're going to have to make that somewhat of a sacrifice. And quite frankly, I just don't like anybody below Seth Curry at the shooting guard position, so it's going to be a struggle tonight. Let's move on from there to what I would call probably the most risky of all of these core plays tonight, but I think that this is a game that suits him well. Dallas continues to want to run out these weird Dirk Nowitzki as a center lineups, and while it worked against OKC, I'm not sure how it's going to end up working out with the Lakers. I'm talking about Julius Randle, 12K on FantasyDraft, 6,200 FanDuel, 6,100 on DraftKings. The $6,100 on DraftKings price is what I'm looking at. Anytime you can get a player on DraftKings cheaper than FanDuel, I'm all about going for it because typically the scores on DraftKings end up being 2 to 5 points higher. In fact, at one point yesterday, I think Kawhi was at like 30 fantasy points on FanDuel DraftKings, and he was at like 24 on FanDuel because of the turnovers being worth less and the extra points you get for 3-point shots. Randle is definitely a guy who could hit a double-double in this game. It's tough to say what the Mavericks are going to do as of now. I would have thought playing against a team like the Thunder, who kept Taj, Domantas Sabonis, Enes Kanter, Steven Adams in rotation to where they liked to put 2 of those at a time on the floor, I thought Dallas was going to have to counter with the normal Farrell, Curry, Barnes, Dirk, Noel lineup, they opted to pull Noel out, shift everybody down, and then stick Wes Matthews at the 3. And it worked out well. And that very same mentality could work against the Lakers because they're god-awful. But I just think they could have some rebounding problems. Harrison Barnes, as good as he is, cannot body up with Julius Randle. And this is one of those situations that really could end up giving Randle like a 50-point fantasy game because they're just not going to put anyone in there that will be able to stop him. Quite frankly, he could probably push Nerlens Noel around a little bit too. So I think this is a good spot to run out Julius Randle. I think the guy that I'm looking at the most, and it's tough, and I'll really work a little bit better at breaking him down than the rest, is not Russell Westbrook, but it's actually John Wall of the Washington Wizards against the Phoenix Suns. 19-6 on FantasyDraft, 10-2 on FanDuel, 11K on DraftKings. So when I'm looking at this matchup against the Suns, first of all, I'm thinking faster pace, better opportunity for Wall to get production. The biggest thing here is he's 8K more on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel, and I've been doing a lot of my action on DraftKings. Throughout the season, I tend to kind of play wherever my money's doing best, and right now it's within DraftKings realm. So I don't like the fact that I have to spend 8 more on Wall, and to boot, it's only like a $2,000 price difference instead of a $3,000 price difference, with the DraftKings budget being a lot tighter considering there's one less position to fill. So there's a little bit of a risk there. Now, is it mitigated when I tell you this? The last 4 games, the Suns have played actual point guards. With all due respect to players in the league, I don't consider guys like Malcolm Brogdon, TJ McConnell, anybody playing point guard for the Bulls, Yogi Ferrell, guys like that. I don't consider them like point guards, real point guards, because someone else on their team is doing something with the ball that tends to keep it out of their hands, or they're not as much of a focus because a team moves the ball around a lot. I mean, if you look at Dallas, you got Seth Curry. If you look at Milwaukee, you obviously have Giannis. If you look at Philadelphia, it's a mess. It's basically the ball just gets passed around to whoever wants to take an ill-advised three-point shot. But John Wall is a real point guard. Against real point guards in those last 4 games, they've given up 47.5 FanDuel points to Isaiah Thomas, 82.5 to Russell Westbrook, 46 to Kemba Walker, 44 to Mike Conley. John Wall needs between 51 and 55 fantasy points to hit value tonight. That's tough on a team where you have a lot of guys who could get hot and completely remove a lot of value from John Wall, Bradley Beal, Otto Porter most specifically. I, however, do think that Wall is going to be able to put together something special. I love the matchup. So I'm willing to put a lot of my stacks on Wall tonight, especially in tournaments. I do think in cash games, it just makes sense to run with Russ because he's the proven entity. He's the guy that, you know, this isn't Dallas they're playing against. It's Portland. They're not going to be playing at as slow of a pace. I think Russ will be a fine play, but if I could save some money and get a guy who could still come through with 5 or 6 times upside, especially on a night where I'm not in love with a lot of the other value options and need to spend cash at other positions, I'm going to take the savings and go with Wall. Moving on to our value plays, in no real specific order tonight, but I think Tyler Ullis is obviously in a great position. 9,100 FantasyDraft, 5,300 FanDuel, 4,600 DraftKings. Again, we're going back to that DraftKings price. We're throwing our hands in the air and saying, yes, this is still way too low. On FantasyDraft, he needs to hit almost 30. On FanDuel, he needs to get 26.5. On DraftKings, he needs about 23 points. That's excellent for his floor and ceiling because, again, not a proven entity here. This is a guy who is really only been evident out of All-Star break. So he's someone I'm going to be looking at tonight very heavily. There's a very good chance that having only gone up $700 in price and being in what I would assume is a very competitive matchup against Washington, he might be another lock at 4,600 for me. I did lock him in when he was 3,900 in 100% of my lineups on Sunday night. Needless to say, I cashed 80% on the dot of those lineups. So going back to the well tonight, Maurice Harkless, 10-5, FantasyDraft, 4,800 FanDuel, 5,300 DraftKings. Again, this is going to be a situation where I'm looking more towards FanDuel, but we'll have him some on DraftKings. Had a big outing the other night in only 30 minutes where he got mid-30 or higher 30 fantasy points. OKC is a average matchup. I don't think there's anything good or bad. You're going to see Robertson guard probably Lillard or McCollum tonight. And Harkless is just not a guy who's known for having that clutch shooting, and he's going to be the guy that you're going to give the ball to when you need a play made. But he's going to get boards, he's going to have a few assists, he's going to have some points, and he's going to have some steals and blocks. So he's a good floor play. I would probably classify him on DraftKings as a better cash game play than tournament, but I still think there's enough upside there. Finally, let's go to Bojan Bogdanovic of the Washington Wizards. He's just been lights out. Coming through in the clutch. He's finally given the Wizards scoring off the bench, which is why the Wizards have started to really be able to move past their opponents much quicker. 9,700 FantasyDraft, 4K FanDuel, 4,900 DraftKings. So again, we're entering into that darn. We really wish that DraftKings number was 4K instead of 4.9. But if he hits 6 3-point shots again, now you've made up 3 points difference right there. That you wouldn't have on FanDuel, and obviously with the turnovers mitigated 2-1 on DraftKings, I think that Boji is worth a good look here. All right, that'll do it for today. Tomorrow we'll be back with a much bigger slate. Don't be shocked if you hear me on YouTube a little bit later today. I'm debating doing something either with the NFL fantasy realm, or possibly I wanted to talk a lot about DVP and how I think it's pretty much the most worthless statistic, and I don't know why people mention it most of the time. A lot of that has to do with some feedback I got for being too heavy on the Houston-San Antonio game last night, because San Antonio is a really good defense, so you never want to play players against them. Well, James Harden owners, I'm sure, are satisfied. I'm sure Kawhi Leonard owners, even though he plays for San Antonio, are fine with having played him. Eric Gordon had a good game. A lot of guys actually had a good game in that game. For heaven's sakes, Danny Green looked good. How often do you say Danny Green looked good? So I'm going to put some more content out today. I just don't know what direction I'm going to aim it at. But make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of that information. Head over to researchfantasy.com. You can just click on the RF logo in our channel banner. Sign up for our NBA newsletter. We'll send you all the news and notes each day about our picks. Head over to Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us again tomorrow.